Are you thinking about an e-bike but don't know what to buy? This is the RV Life Podcast. I'm Dan Hunt with my incredible wife, Patty Hunt. We are your host for the show, and today's guest, he is an e-bike expert. And guess what? After today's show, you will be too.
We've been on the road for 2 years. Well over 2 years, actually, at this point. And we've spent probably the last 4 years looking for e-bikes. So we're excited to share the expert information on e-bikes today.
You know, and e-bikes, it's just something that we love our e-bikes. We love our e-bikes. I don't know how we would actually function without them at this point. Now, right now, we are in Virginia. We're just outside of Washington, D.C. The cherry blossoms are in bloom, and man, it is pink everywhere around here.
It is absolutely beautiful. And this is where e-bikes really come in handy because we could ride around for 5 or 10 miles on our bikes, just enjoying the beautiful cherry blossoms.
And they really, really are beautiful in this area. Now, you know, we're going to head up to Maryland and see a couple of the grandkids this weekend as well. That's going to be kind of cool to see some of the grandkids we haven't seen in a while.
Absolutely. It's been a little, difficult. We're hanging out here with my mom as she's not doing very well. And so, now being able to get out and travel and see some more of the kids and grandkids is going to be great.
It really is a lot of fun. It puts a little extra pep in your step. We had one of the grandkids that came down here to see us last weekend, and then next weekend we're going to go see another one. And it just puts that little extra pep in your step when the grandkids are around.
So it might be a pep in the step, but then I need some rest after. We're talking 3, 4, and 6-year-olds. So it's a lot.
They really do wear you out. Uh-oh, there's that sound. It's time for today's fun fact. Patty, what do you have for us today?
This fun fact that I'm going to give just blew my mind. So you may have to, backtrack to hear this again. Did you know there is an estimated that 300 million e-bikes are in use worldwide, will be in use worldwide by the end of 2023.
300 million e-bikes. That's a lot of e-bikes. And, when we went a little deeper and we started looking into some of the stats about e-bikes, in 2021, the e-bike market was valued at about $27.2 billion with a B dollars. And by the end of this year, 2023, they feel it will be a $40 billion market. That's a lot of zeros.
That is. I wish I had some stock in the e-bike market if that was possible. And they're saying that it's growing 10% a year for the next 5 years. So today's guest is an expert, and he's going to talk all things electric bikes, e-bikes as they're called, so you're prepared to choose the bike that's right for you.
That's right. We will talk motors, we'll talk wheels, we'll talk seats, we'll talk everything that you could possibly ever want to think about e-bikes, and we're going to get to that.
The most important part of your RV is the roof. If your roof leaks, your trip and your RV get ruined. You can take it to a dealership or service center to be maintained at their expensive rates. Or you can maintain it yourself over a weekend for a fraction of the cost. Liquid Rubber RV roof products will keep you dry and leak-free. Visit shopliquidrubber.com/RVLife. Use coupon code RVLife.
As a little boy, he loved his bike, often getting in trouble for coming home way after dark. In 2010, he saw his first e-bike and he was hooked. hooked. Later, he became the distributor for a Florida e-bike company and became the #1 rep in his very, very first year. His passion for the industry led him to start his own company, and we are so glad that he did.
Today, we're talking to Dan Sobczak, founder of Kraken Adventure Bikes, and we're so excited.
Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
We are absolutely incredible here. Now, you know what? Let's get right into it, Dan. You know, we're talking about e-bikes. We're talking about how to choose the right e-bike for you, for our listener. How do they choose that e-bike that's just right for them? But let's start out by looking at the industry, man. This industry is only about 10, maybe 15 years old, but it has really, really blown up.
It really has. I'll tell you, especially looking at like our European counterparts overseas, that's one of the biggest markets in the world right now. And we look at a lot at them to kind of see what trends we can expect here in the United States. And I mean, it's following right behind it.
It really, really, really is.
Okay, so you've been in the e-bike business for so long, over 10 years, I'm thinking. And how did you get started?
I got started. I was a customer. I just thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread. I mean, like a bike that propels itself, it was the first time I got on that thing, and it made me feel like I was 15 years old, like when I first got my go-kart. I just thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And it really has changed and impacted my life. Just from riding those things around, I didn't realize how versatile it was having that bike. And when I started getting into business, that bike was a crucial part of, dragging stuff into trade shows and going back and forth. I mean, it really saved me a lot of time. So, and in a world where time is money, right? Anything to save you time.
Yeah. And we feel the same way. I was a little skeptical about needing an electric bike, an e-bike, but we had the opportunity to try them. And it's like you said, I was hooked. For us, it was driving around a campground. It was like a 3-mile loop through this forest area that we drove around. And I just thought it was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, it is really cool. I mean, some of my favorite places, I live in a rural area, a little town called Umatilla. If you sneezed, you blow right through it. And we're right on the edge of the Ocala National Forest. And I mean, I try to get out as much as I can. I know we're pretty busy, but, even just going through some of the trails in the forest, I mean, it's really incredible if you just kind of want to get out and really see everything.
Now, Dan, you started in this industry working for somebody else, and you were so good at it, you decided to start your own company. Let's talk about working for somebody else. You sold other kind of bikes as well than what you're working with right now.
I did. That's how we got started. That's how I learned everything. And I learned a lot of stuff about what to do and what not to do. So I started as a distributor. I think over the last couple years, we've really gone and pitched, I want to say close to 15 or 20 other e-bike companies that we've worked with over the past. A lot of good companies, but I've learned a lot about their distribution model, learned a lot about their bikes, and learned a lot about really how to make a better bike.
And that's what we're talking about today, a better bike. We have had several bikes from several different companies throughout time, and I'm not going to knock any of them because I got to tell you, all of them are pretty darn good. The first bike that we had out there is the Rad bike, and I mean they were kind of like the first to the marketplace in the United States with the electric bike. They're big and they're bulky and they're expensive. But at the same time, I'm not going to knock any of the e-bikes, but what I've seen you do with this current version of the Kraken bike, which is called the Punisher, and that's the bikes that Patty and I drive. And there's a lot of pictures of us. Patty, you're going to put a bunch of them up on social media. So head over to the Instagram page, head over to the Facebook page, head over to our YouTube channel. We're working on a short right now that should be up in the next week or so with these Punisher bikes. But But, let's really talk about some of the nuances. Can you give me one thing that you have done with this bike that makes it a little bit different than some of the other bikes that are in the marketplace right now?
Yeah. So one of the things that we really identified, and I like to focus primarily on the battery. The battery is one of the most important things, in my personal opinion, for these e-bikes. And I've noticed that there's just really not a huge education piece from the consumer side, because all they're seeing is an electric bike and they see a price tag. And I can tell you, just by speaking to thousands and thousands of customers, they don't know where to start. And the issue is you go down what I call the rabbit hole, where you just start doing research upon research upon research, and you can never really find that right bike because you're not really sure what to ask or what to look for. So one of the things I will tell you, I always start with a battery. They have different ranges of batteries depending on the e-bikes. Our Fat Tire Folder runs a 48 volt system, and it has two different flavors of batteries. You'll see a lot of my competitors running what I call low end batteries, 10 amps. And the amps is really important. The amp hours is really what's going to dictate the range of the overall bike. So we run a minimum of a 14 amp hour battery, which allows my riders to have at least a 3 to 4 hour ride time. So my average rider is only going to ride maybe an hour, hour and a half before they get tired. So even my lower end bike, that's still going to give you a good 2 solid rides out of that bike before you need to charge it up.
And I think that's the battery is really important. It's like you said, when we were thinking about electric bikes, the battery, the amps, the motor, which we're going to get into more of that. That's not my wheelhouse. I depend on Dan, but I have come to learn the battery is the most important because I want to be able to ride longer. And again, we're going to get more into that. I just wanted, the whole purpose of the podcast is to give people information on how to choose an e-bike. But who is an electric bike for? Who do you recommend using an electric bike?
Now, obviously that question, because I run a e-bike company, is everybody, but I think everybody should have one. That's just my personal opinion. But my customer base right now, they're like you guys. They're traveling, they're in RVs, they're tight on space. Many of my customers have either hip or knee issues that they wanted to rehab, and that's another thing maybe we can go into later. There's a lot of really great uses for the e-bike, and I think that your average customer doesn't really realize that they may need or want one in their life.
Let's get into those why questions. Why should people have an e-bike? I know for me, a couple years ago, I had a stroke. And that e-bike really got me up and around, and I was able to use the pedal assist. And I really think it helped me in my recovery. What are some other whys of the e-bike?
So I know there's been a lot of talk about, why should I use an e-bike, especially from my regular cycle riders. That's usually where I get a lot of pushback because there's that myth out there that if you ride an e-bike, you can't get exercise. So that's completely false. I just want to throw that out there right now. I'm sure we'll probably have some comments about that later, which is fine. But I mean, in my personal world right now, I will tell you, I have rehabbed 2 ankles and also rehabbed a knee. And I've lost over 15 pounds riding an e-bike on a consistent basis.
I'm so glad you said that. Dan and I work with a health coach. As a matter of fact, we had her on the show a couple months back. And when I first talked about an e-bike, she said, yeah, but you're not getting exercise. So we got the e-bikes anyway. And we were in Albuquerque at the Balloon Fiesta and did 5.5 miles back and forth twice a day. So 4 times. I called her up and I said, look, I have pain in areas I didn't know existed on my body. Don't tell me I'm not getting exercise. So for me personally, it is a way to get exercise because I just use the pedals more. But when I'm out 3 miles or a big hill that I can't handle, I have the assistance. So for me personally, I want to dispel that no exercise on an electric bike right from the beginning.
Exactly. So, and a couple things too, especially when you ride a bike, there's 2 factors that are involved in really making the ride what I call uncomfortable. So you have headwind where you're getting a lot of wind that's really pushing against you. And you got elevation changes when you hit those hills. And especially if you're outside of Florida, there are some places in Florida, but mostly those northern places where you have hills and mountains and stuff like that. Even a lot of your state parks. That's what makes it unenjoyable at that point. And it'd be great to just power up those hills and then, continue pedaling later on once you hit flatter ground.
One of the things that really has changed our life with an e-bike. When we were walking before we had the e-bikes with us on our adventures, we had about a mile radius that we could go and take people to and show them over on our YouTube channel, Exploring Through Our Lens. But now that we have these e-bikes, I'm saying we have like a 10-mile radius. We went into this little town of Schlegman, Arizona, where before we could only go in the little downtown area. But the second time we went in, we had the e-bikes and we explored all over that town and did a great video. We'll link to that video down below in the show notes. But Dan, talk about how, having that e-bike and that ability to go 30, 40 miles on one charge of batteries really changes the way people use a bike.
It really does, because now you're expanding your radius of what you can travel. And that's really the coolest thing about these e-bikes is, especially if you like to explore and you want to really see what that town, that city, that state park, the other parks have to offer. And those e-bikes can really get you there. And I know for a lot of my customers and me myself, because I've been riding for well over 15 years. So the things that I've been able to see versus, if I was on a regular bike, I have a range of about 20 to 25 miles, and so does my wife. And that's about it. Then we're done. It's just too uncomfortable to ride at that point, especially if you're down south in Florida areas where we are, where it's hot.
Right.
So, you definitely don't want to be on a bike, in extreme hot or extreme cold for that long. Your body's not meant for it.
Yeah.
You'll overheat and collapse.
Absolutely. For us, being in the RV, because we started looking at e-bikes before we ever thought about the RV. Now that we have an RV, of course, space is tight, but now there's a folding bike, and that's what the Punisher is. It's a folding bike. So why? What's the advantage of having that folding bike?
Huge advantage. We primarily focus on the RV market. Boats and planes are another secondary market for us. Really one thing, and the reason why we wanted to focus on the folding models is because we travel too. So, and one thing that we found is we're also tight on space. And I can tell you that it would be almost impossible for me to take my full-size electric mountain bike with me on the road. It's too heavy, it's too big, it's too bulky, and I don't have room for that, because my only option, especially when we're traveling around doing trade shows, is I have to tow a trailer and there's just no room. So I love the folding option. And I know for a lot of my customers, we specifically make our bikes to try to fit in the lower cabinets if you have those, or even inside, or if you're towing a vehicle, it fits perfectly in the back seat. And you can easily stick two back there without a problem.
Right. We have a 4-door Jeep, and we have both bikes folded there. What's great for me is the bikes, and people always ask how much they weigh, and they're about 60 plus pounds. For me, the fact that they fold, I'm not the strongest person in the world, but makes it so much easier for me to handle and get it in and out of the vehicle.
Yeah, exactly. Those bikes can really come up there in weight. What makes our bikes a little special compared to some other bikes out there is we use a magnesium alloy. It cuts the weight down, but it also is stronger than steel, which is pretty cool. So yeah, your average full size e-bike out there is going to range in the 80 to 90 pound range. They're very, very heavy.
They are very, very heavy, but the Punisher only comes in less than 65 pounds. Let's say it that way. Now, one of the things that people talk to me about is I talk to people about e-bikes, and Patty and I travel around, and we actually have a lecture on e-bikes and how to choose that right e-bike for you. We do that lecture at different RV shows around. So if you ever see us out and about, it's Dan and Patty Hunt or the RV Life podcast or RV Life, and we're speaking about e-bikes. Come on in and say hi to us. But one of the things that, especially at the last show that I did a lecture on e-bikes at, people ask the question is the e-bike with the folding hinge as strong as a regular bike?
I will tell you, we have done all kinds of really crazy, interesting product testing. In fact, I have a neighbor, we call him Bubba, and Bubba is 320 pounds. And Bubba likes to jump our prototype bikes. We always give him the bikes to test because we want to know what breaks. He has wrapped it around a tree. He's jumped off a small ramp. It's actually very entertaining, I think. But don't worry, he's wearing a helmet and safety gear. Yeah, we've rolled this thing downstairs. I will tell you, just in my experience, that hinge is really, really hard to break because it's also part of the frame, which is nice, and it's connected with a nice solid steel rod. So, I mean, I can tell you in the last, 7 years of selling e-bikes, I've never once seen a frame bented or broken at that fold point.
And while we're talking about that fold point and that lock, I just real quick want to talk about this locking mechanism that you have is very, very different than any other one that I've seen or that Patty and I have had. It really is very simple to use, very simple to lock, very simple to unlock. Talk a little bit about why that design came about or how that design came about.
So with the folding action, we wanted to make sure that it was super simple. So that's really, really important, because if it's too complicated, and I've seen other units in the past, 6, 7 steps to unfold and fold these things back up. And I mean, I remember when I first got my hands on a small folding unit, it took 7 or 8 steps to me to unfold this thing. And I think I'm pretty mechanically inclined, but I'm like, there's no way the average customer is going to be able to let me go ahead and just whip this thing together. We wanted something simple. And I mean, even with our bike production, everything that we do is we want everything to be super low maintenance and super easy for the customer to use. So it's a very simple fold mechanism. It folds and it locks in place. And there's a secondary lock on the main fold just to make sure it doesn't come loose while you're riding. And we also have on the handlebar too, that breaks down and folds down as well. There's a little clasp that we had designed to kind of get in there to make sure it doesn't pop loose as well. So, but I mean, my average customer can do that first time, no problem, less than 10, 15 seconds.
I'll tell you what, is all the e-bikes that we have had, the Punisher really has the best folding design. It is so easy to break this bike down to get it in the back of the car. We're listening to the RV Life podcast. I'm Dan Hunt, your host, with my incredible wife, Patty Hunt. And we're going to be back with more about e-bikes. We're going to talk about the battery, the motor, the tires, the wheels, the shocks, the seats, all of that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about that right after this.
When traveling in your RV, how do you navigate? Do you use a paper map, a GPS, or do you use Google Maps? Our sponsor, RV Trip Wizard, has the solution, and it just works.
It just works. We do not move one single solitary inch in our RV without first consulting with RV Trip Wizard.
Now, you've been listening to a lot of great advice on choosing the right e-bike for you. And I'm going to jump in. One of the most important things for me was comfort. I've had where I fell and actually broke my tailbone. So the comfort for me is most important. And your seat design, shocks, those kinds of things makes this bike really comfortable for me. Can you talk about that? What should people look for? Why you chose the design you did?
You know what? Let's break these down into each individual section. Since you talked about the seat, Dan, let's go down the list here to the seat and talk about the seat first. Wow, that seat is comfortable is all I have to say. It's bigger, it's got springs, it's cushy. Tell me about why you chose that seat, because it's got to be a more expensive seat than, the standard bike out there.
It is. We were very, very strategic. In fact, I can tell you finding the right seat took me about 6 months. We had ordered over 25 different samples of seats. We had to put them all on and have people test them. We had about 8 or 10 testers, and they gave us feedback on all those seats. That seat that we currently have on there really, really does, especially for larger riders. You're talking like 200 pounds plus. You're really going to notice the difference. Not you.
Okay, good clarifying. I'm looking at him. No, I am not.
I'm talking about me.
Okay. So I am nowhere near 200 pounds, but that seat really made a difference. When I sat on this bike, it was the biggest difference for me. And like Dan said, we've tested so many of them, riding around, and we'll ride sometimes for 2 or 3 hours. I don't want to get off and be in pain. So there's also shocks on there, which are supporting my comfort of my butt. Can I say that on the podcast? So talk a little bit about the shocks.
So shocks are actually really, really important. I mean, obviously, we know that, like a truck, a 4-wheel drive truck, you'd want it to have full suspension on it, especially if you go off road. Our bikes specifically are designed to go off road. They do really well on concrete, but if you wanted to take it on a trail or if you were at a state park or just around the campsite, let's talk about the terrain. So you're going to experience, grass, dirt, sticks, rocks, maybe even snow or puddles. So it's important to have that dual suspension. And believe it or not, if you look around on the market, we're one of the only companies that has a fat tire folding bike with true dual suspension. All my competitors that I've either sold or ridden, they usually will only have just the front suspension. That's called a hardtail. I will tell you, as being a larger individual, I'm about 260 pounds, going off road with only front suspension really does a number on you. It's not comfortable. It cuts my ride time down by at least a good 30, 45 minutes just because I'm so uncomfortable.
Let me just say that what I'll do right now is over on our Instagram page, I'm going to put a picture of the Punisher and I'm going to put arrows at where the shocks are. So let's talk first about the front shocks on the front wheel. Most e-bikes on the market have pretty much the same front shock that are out there. So let's talk first about those front shocks. And that's what, if you go over to the Instagram page, we will put a picture of the bike. And we're talking about the front shocks right now.
So the front shocks, a lot of people don't know. There are a lot of differences between the shocks. We chose an upgraded shock. I will tell you that industry standard, you're only going to get maybe about an inch and a quarter flex on some of the cheaper front suspension. We have upgraded, so now we actually get 2 1/4 just on the front. We also have the ability to lock and unlock our front suspension as well, depending on where you're riding. So a couple things. Like if you're just doing a regular street ride, riding on concrete, majority flat surfaces, because you're not always going to be hitting a trail, you'd be able to lock that suspension to give you a little smoother ride.
Yeah. And a big difference in some of the other bikes that I have ridden to this bike, you talk about that 1 inch of the front shock to the 2.5 inches of the front shock. I can really feel a difference. Now, I might press the bikes a little more than the average rider does, but I have to say that the front shocks are really great. Now, I want to direct your attention, and I'm going to put an arrow up in the picture on Instagram to that shock that's right under the seat. And it's a little teensy fat shock that's mounted between the back wheel and the seat. Let's talk about what that shock does for the rider.
So that one is what I call a compression shock. So it doesn't give a huge amount of flex, but you really don't need to. So it's actually rated up to 850 pounds. And, there's no way that your average rider is going to weigh that much. But especially for somebody like me that is a larger rider, it's going to give you an additional 1 to 1.25 inches on that back flex, which really makes a big difference. So with all the front, the rear, and the seat upgrades, those are really the mechanics that all come together as one to really make sure that the rider has a smooth, comfortable ride. Our goal is to try to make that ride kind of like a Cadillac is what I consider it. That was really the goal of the whole setup.
It really is like a Cadillac. The previous 2, not just the last bikes we had, but the bikes we had before that and the bikes we had before that, they all just had the seat post shock, which is kind of a standard thing out there in the marketplace. But this shock that you have designed into the Punisher, man, I got to tell you, it rocks, because you can feel that thing when you're going over bumps and rougher terrain. You can really feel that thing move. Such an important piece.
Okay. So now the one thing that I'll say that, I looked at when I looked at these bikes, and I've heard other people say this, they look really big. I had not really ridden a regular bike much before that. So yeah, when I was a kid, but just life, and we haven't really ridden bikes. So when I saw this bike and how large the tires are, it was a little intimidating. And I'm going to ask you to, explain to our listeners what to look for in the tires. What I find for me is having those bigger tires does allow me, I've gone on the sand, I've gone in gravel, I've gone around a campground, and I feel more secure. So let's talk about the Punisher and the tires and why. Describe that. What should our listeners look for?
Exactly. So I think you already kind of answered that question a little bit. The purpose, the reason why we run those fat tires, especially if you're in an area with light sand, gravel, or sticks, for example, it's important to have those fat knobby tires because they're going to dig into the ground and give you more traction. I will tell you the majority of the people who, we wipe out sometimes, it's usually because that back tire. Yeah, it's usually because that back tire going around a quarter hits a little bit of soft sand and that bike's going to slide out from underneath you. That's the most common one I see. Either that or having the small wheelbase. Your normal, regular bike size tire is about 2 1/4. So it's not going to have a lot of contact with the ground. So it's just something to be aware of. Even if you're just having intentions of just riding around the neighborhood or just on concrete in general, you're still going to encounter where you're going to hit a puddle or soft sand or one of those. So those fat tires are really going to help you stay on that bike.
We're talking about fat tires. Let's be very, very specific. The Punisher has 4-inch tires. They are 4-inch nubby tires, which I think is kind of important as well, especially for some of the things that we do. I have ridden bikes with 1-inch tires and 2-inch tires. The stability level is just not there. Talk about, so I'm in the market, say I've never had an electric bike. I'm in the market. My personal thought would be I would want a minimum of 3-inch tires, but I really want that 4-inch tire.
Yeah, there's not a ton of difference between the 3 and the 4s, but either one is really going to do it. So, I mean, I highly recommend choosing the fat tires, especially if if you're not let's call it a stable person. I have those customers that will flat out tell me, "Listen, I'm accident prone," and I said, we need to get you in the fat tire one because that's where you need to be, especially if your balance isn't quite there, or if you just haven't ridden a bike in 10 years. I have a lot of customers that just haven't ridden in a while. So that would be a really good intro bike for you guys to really kind of get in, build your stability. And the most important thing is really build your confidence on the bike. Kind of like what you were saying, Patty, the first couple times it was intimidating for you, which is very normal. After your first couple rides, you'll be a pro.
Okay, let's move on to the wheels. So we're talking about the tires. Let's move on to the wheels. We have 20-inch wheels on the Punisher. I have driven bikes with as small as 8-inch wheels and pretty much anything in between. Why is that 20-inch wheel so important for this size of a bike?
Couple things. So we knew one thing. The first thing that we've really come to discover is we didn't want to go less than 20. So your next step down from a 20-inch rim is typically a 16-inch rim. Those are the types of rim sizes we use on some of our small folders. So now you're going from more of an outdoor rugged bike to more of a transportation bike. So each bike kind of has its own different uses. Now, if on the other side of that scale, if we went up and went to a 26-inch rim base, what that's going to do for my customer is it's going to raise the actual height of the bar to get your leg over. So that was another thing we had to be very conscious of, because the next step up would be a 26-inch rim. Those are what you're going to find on your larger, heavier, full-size bike. So, and there's pros and cons to both, but the reason we chose the 20 is I think it's perfect. It's right in the middle.
And then you can go down to that 300 bike that you can buy at some of the big box stores. And I got to tell you, I have ridden those. As a matter of fact, the day that you and I were together, I borrowed a guy's that was across from me just to see what the difference was. I almost feel like those are dangerous because I think that was a 10-inch wheel.
Yeah, those are what I call novelty bikes, and you're going to find them in that range, and you're going to see a couple of them. I mean, the wheelbase in the combination with the frame, it's really intended for almost a child or a kid. But then again, it's not, because I mean, it can get speeds up to 18 miles an hour. So it's like, I know I wouldn't feel comfortable sticking my kid on something like that. So those little rims as well. I mean, now your turning radius, if you go to turn, there's a very good chance you can overturn and then go right over the handlebars. So the other thing is going to be safety, because if you have anybody that's probably over 150 pounds, like, you're definitely not meant for that, and you're gonna break it real quick.
Right, and that's really good information. I think, and again, in the years that Dan and I have looked for bikes, probably the most important thing is the motor and the battery it's something we get asked about a lot. So can you explain what people should look for when it comes to motor and battery of an electric bike?
This is actually the most important topic. I'm going to spend an extra minute on this, kind of diving in, because there's a lot of things. And this is where a lot of people get confused, especially with the motor type, the motor setup, and also in combination with the battery. Kind of like how our suspension and seat kind of work in tangent. The battery and the motor also work together like that. The first thing you need to figure out is what size motor do you need? The first thing I'm looking at when I have a new customer that I'm speaking with, I'm looking at their height and their weight. So, and I can tell you, especially if you're 110 pounds soaking wet, you probably don't need a big battery. So the motor is really that driving force. So the motor actually has towing capacity as well. So now when I say towing, it's not only the rider, but a lot of those e-bikes can also tow additionally. So our Fat Tire Punisher Mark V version actually has a towing capacity of 400 pounds, but that's because we threw a 1,000-watt motor in there. So you're going to see a couple different sizes of motors depending on the setup of the e-bike. Your small folders usually are going to range in the 250 to 350 range because typically they're not designed for towing and they're not designed for larger riders. You'll typically see those e-bikes in small to medium-sized frames. So that means really anybody above 6 foot, that's not going to work for you. Once you kind of step up, and industry standard right now is about a 500 watt. That's usually what I'm seeing out there the most. The 500 watt motor is a great motor, even for a larger rider. It has a lot of versatility. So I know a lot of people are wanting the 750s or even the 1000s, but it kind of depends on the application. So if you're in an area with lots of hills or terrain, so let's talk about that, especially, me coming in at about 263 pounds. I think I weighed myself the other day. I struggle going up a hill. And I know that's one of the most common questions that I get from guys around my size is that thing going to get me up a hill? So let's stick me on a 500 watt versus my 1,000. Yes, it will get me up the hill, but the difference is the 500 watt motor is going to suck more juice out of my battery with my fat butt going up that hill. That's just the reality of it. The 1,000 watt is not going to struggle. It has a higher torque base. It is intended for a larger rider like myself. So I would say the best thing that you can do is really kind of assess your situation and say, all right, are you a larger rider? Yes, you're going to need more battery. Same instance like when you're looking at a truck. It's do you need the V6 or do you need the V8? How far are you going? What are you towing? What areas do you think you're going to be in? Those questions you kind of need to ask yourself first. And then based on what you come up with, then you need to choose the right bike that's going to be a good fit for what you need it to do.
Right. And now for us, let me just make sure to get clarity. The Punisher is 1,000 watts, right? That's what it's called. It's 1,000. The Mark V Punisher is 1,000 watts. It doesn't affect me. I'm certainly not 200 plus pounds. I'm not going to discuss how much I weigh, but it's not going to hurt to have that extra. With the 1,000 watt, I could go further for longer. My battery's going to last longer, and I could attach one of those carts and throw some grandkids in there and pull them as well.
Absolutely. So we actually have two different flavors, is what I like to call them, of e-bikes. We have the 500 watt. That one has a combination battery of a 48 volt, 14 amp. In the e-bike industry, and I know that's a number that confuses a lot of people. They're like, well, what does that mean? Again, it's going to equate to ride time. You're right. You can complicate it as much as you want. I have very technical conversations with individuals that have spent the last 5 years going down the rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, our bikes, we just want to make sure you have enough juice to get where you're going, because there's nothing worse than taking a bike out and it dying within 45 minutes to an hour, because that's happened to me, and it's not fun. So if you kill that battery, that's still a 60, 70 pound, 80 pound bike that you're traveling around. Imagine tying a half a cinder block to the back of a regular bike and trying to drive that thing down the road. So it's important that you kind of realize, our minimum standard for batteries is at least a 14 amp. We're not going to run anything lower than that because it's just not going to give you enough ride time. If a lot of my competitors are running those 10 amp batteries, they're usually China cell batteries. The battery itself usually only lasts about 2 or 3 years. You're going to see a lot of power drain, usually in year 2 or year 3. And it's just not going to give the quality that you're kind of looking for.
Before we move on to warranty and service, I just want to point out, Patty, you talked about the cart that kind of goes behind. Dan, I saw that you just put that on the website, so you can go at the link that's in the show notes below. You can also go to Instagram. We'll show you a picture of it and give you a link to it from over there. But there's that cart that you can put a pet or a grandchild or something like that in. And that is available in the show notes, but it also is available at KrakenAdventureBikes.com. Now let's talk about service, because that might be the number one question that I get. Can I take my e-bike into Joe's bike shop at the corner?
So the major driver for us kind of creating this business is because, again, like I had mentioned, I've been a distributor for over 5 years. That's been the biggest pain point for me as a distributor, is the servicing side. I will tell you, your average e-bike manufacturer out there, it's so important. You need to go through and read on their website what the procedure is, because a lot of them, believe it or not, require you to ship that behemoth back to them. And a lot of times they won't pay for shipping, and it will state in the notes, customer is responsible for shipping bike back to the manufacturer. And if you don't have a FedEx account, I mean, the average person doesn't, or a UPS account, that bike can cost $300 to $500 to ship that back. So I remember the first year when I first started, selling e-bikes, to folding e-bikes to the RV community, I got yelled and screamed at my first year. And I'm like, wow, it was a huge eye opener. And I said, how do we fix this? Because asking an RV owner that's traveling all over the United States, especially my full-timers, they're not going to have room to carry a box and ship that thing back for service.
Now, you've put together a service program that kind of different than anything I've ever seen in the industry.
Yeah. So my biggest pet peeve is just a person is customer service. I cannot stand bad customer service. I mean, it irritates me. I'm also a local guide for Google and Yelp and some of those. So, I mean, if I find great service, I like to reward people. But I mean, there was a huge loss here, because I'm like, how do we keep continuing to sell our e-bikes to the RV community and not have a service plan for them? Because obviously at some point, you're going to need to have service. So we said, well, we don't need to bring the bike back to us. Let's figure out a more convenient way so that the customers can stay local, because, typically they're camping, they're out at a campground, they're out exploring the country. That's what they want to do. So what we've done is we've developed a network of over 500 bike shops, and that number is growing all the time, that will work with us, that will work with our bikes. And we also gave it a white glove treatment. So, and this is an extended warranty that we have. It is an upgrade of $80, but we try to keep it very reasonable. It includes accidental damage, which is another huge thing, because I know doing this for 9 years, especially on the servicing side, customers like to sometimes make stuff up. That way it gives you the ability to just be honest and tell us what happened. So we give you that flexibility as well. And it's as simple as just calling us up and then telling us what the problem is. If you need parts, we send you parts. That's all included. And we cover your service and book your appointment for you. It's what I call the white glove treatment. It's something that we came up with because that's the way I would want to be treated if I had a problem.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. That's one of the things I think that attracted Patty and I to the company, because, we're putting our name on the line. We are out there riding these bikes, yes, and we're pushing these bikes, yes. But the bottom line is it has to be a quality product with a quality people behind it, and I think that's one of the most important things to us.
And I'm with you on customer service. It's a pet peeve, and I think of a lot of people. So the fact that I can pretty much wherever I am on the road know that I could get somewhere and get something fixed. Dan had gotten a flat tire. That is priceless in my mind. And we don't know of any other company that does that.
Yeah, I think that the service program is incredible. Now, basically, you have Kraken Adventure Bikes that has two bikes to sell. We have what we call the Mark V and we have the Mark III. Now, the Mark V is what Patty and I drive. That's the orange bike. It is the coolest looking bike in the marketplace. I got to tell you that. I'm going to say that right out front. You can go over to the Instagram page. There's going to be some pictures of the bikes over there. But the Mark V is orange. It's got black lettering. It is just a cool looking bike. But tell me, Dan, if I meet somebody in a campground, and we're in Virginia right now, so if I meet somebody here in Virginia and they want that Kraken bike, how are you going to get that bike to them?
No problem. In fact, since this is our niche, either campgrounds, RV parks, they all have that central office and we can coordinate with them as well. So, and we've done that several times in the past and it actually works out pretty smooth. So it's as simple as you're rolling up to your RV park, parking, and then just getting the contacts information, and we book everything for you. Usually we'll call ahead to the RV park, make sure it's okay, and also let them know, hey, we're expecting a pretty large box to come. So no problems at all.
And we are working on a video right now over on our YouTube side, which is called Exploring Through Our Lens, where Dan, you and Patty actually unboxed a bike and you put it together. Now, unfortunately, it was a very windy day that day. And the sound just did not come out for us. So we're kind of sneaking around and doing some editing tricks to put that unboxing video together. But we will have that very, very shortly over on Exploring Through Our Lens. We'll put it up on the Instagram page as well when that gets done. Now, let's talk about the Mark V is the 1,000-watt vehicle. What else is different? It's got, you know what it has that nobody else has? I can charge my phone off that battery.
Yes, you can. That's one of the other cool things. In fact, we have upgraded that. So there's 3 major differences between the 2 units. But one of the, I think personally, the coolest thing is that Bafang LCD. So Bafang is a trademark name in the industry. A lot of people look for those components because they're good quality. They do a really great job and they're very simple to use. The LCD that we use is awesome. In fact, for all those naysayers out there that says you can't burn any calories while riding, we put a calorie counter on there for you as well. So that way you can show those people, nope, I got, burned 500 calories on this ride. So that's one of the cool things.
Yeah, I could give that to my health coach and show her proof.
You could.
That's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. The other cool thing that it does have a USB port on the bottom, so you can charge your phone while you ride, which is super great. Especially if you just run into an issue, maybe your cell phone died and you're in a remote area and you need to call someone. It's a safety feature too for you, so that way you have extra battery power. Or if you just take it camping and need to, charge up your devices, no big deal. And because of that large 17 amp battery we put in there, you can charge all your devices, no problem. The other cool thing that LCD does is it has a password protection on there. You can set that so you can put a 4-digit code in there. So if someone were to come up, try to power on your unit and take off with it, they'd need to put in that 4-digit code and even to have any of the power go to the unit.
Yeah, that works really well. Patty and I have that on ours. That one is orange. It's called the Punisher. The other one is called the Punisher as well. Now that's the Mark III. That one is white. Now it is a 500-watt motor. And I think the battery is a little bit smaller too. Is that correct?
Yes. So there's 3 major differences between the 2 models. We wanted to keep everything pretty simple. So the 500-watt folder, which is our Punisher Mark III, that one has the 14 amp battery. The 14 amp battery is going to give you realistically, if you have it on low and you're pedaling, because that's how we quote people. If you have it on high and you're just using your twist throttle, because our units do have twist throttles, you're going to cut that mileage in half. Punisher Mark III is going to get you on average 3 to 4 hours of ride time, which is pretty darn good. So, that's on average like 2 rides and then you charge it up. Now, the Punisher Mark V, on the other hand, double the motor and almost double the battery. So we give you a monster 17 amp Samsung battery. The thing that's really unique about those Samsung batteries is they last forever. You're talking 8 to 10 years on the average life of the battery. Plus, it's going to give you an amazing 8 to 10 hours of ride time. So I took that out to a campsite. I rode Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and still had juice on Monday.
Yeah, I have gone a long, long way on that. And I just plugged it in for the first time since we got it over a month ago. I just plugged it in for the first time.
We push it.
Patty loves the money, and we have a discount for the RV Life podcast listeners that's just absolutely amazing. But first, let's talk about the Mark V, the orange bike, the one that Patty and I works. How much is that, Patty?
So this bike is, and it's industry, priced really well. It's $23.99 for the Mark V. That's the 1,000-watt. The white bike, which is the 500-watt Mark III, is $21.99. But Dan was so gracious to give us a discount code for the RV Life podcast listeners. And that, Dan, is $400 off. Is that correct? Off the Mark V. Is that correct?
Sure is. That is correct.
I just want to make sure whenever I say a discount of $400, I want the owner to be nodding his head that I got that right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
No problem.
So that takes that bike down to $19.99, which is an incredible price for that bike. Now, the code, by the way, we're going to put it in the show notes below. It's Hunt, H-U-N-T. So like Dan and Patty Hunt, H-U-N-T. We're going to put it in the show notes below.
With the link.
With the link to get to the website for Kraken Adventure Bikes. But I got to tell you, this is a great price. It's a great discount. And Dan, you have plenty. You could ship 10 or 15 of these today if you wanted to, right?
No problem. We actually have a 5,000 square foot warehouse we operate out of Eustis, Florida.
Yeah, and it's really beautiful. Patty and I just left Eustis, Florida. We had a great time down there. Just a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. This has been great. We really, really love that. The only one last thing I just do want to mention real quick is transportation. We actually have 5 bikes that we're traveling around with right now. So if you see us and you want to buy a bike, we have some brand new ones. But we were able to put 3 of these bikes in the back of our Jeep Wrangler. We were able to put 2 of these bikes inside. We just took the chairs out and we put them on each side of the table in the RV and then locked them in there. So really, really versatile. But I think on your website, you also sell a rack for the back of the RV or your car. Isn't that correct?
We do. And I'm glad that you gave me an opportunity to speak to everybody, because I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole as well on a lot of the different racks, because we were trying to find the right company to partner with, because I noticed that not all racks are created equal. In fact, the first thing I noticed, if you go to Amazon and you type in Fat Tire bike racks, and that's another question I get a lot as well. If I already have an existing rack, is that going to work on our new electric bikes?
Probably
the
not.
answer to that is really, it's because you're tripling your weight at that point. And especially if you're using the small 1-inch or 2-inch tires, you're going to need a coupling that's going to be able to get over the fat tire. And they're rated for that as well. The other thing you need to look at is the weight. There's a weight limit on all of these products. So make sure, you calculate your weight on your 2 bikes, and you want to try to go 10 or 15% above that. So don't cheap out on racks. I will tell you that, because I've had multiple customers call me saying they bought a cheap bike rack, and that bike has bounced off the rack and rolled down the road. And because they purchased our warranty, covers accidental damage, so we actually had to replace some of the parts. But the racks that we have on our bike, they are rated specifically for RVs. And if you do your research on Amazon, you'll see a lot of racks in the $300 to $400 range. You'll see a note in there, and it says not for RVs. And the reason why is because in those RVs, the back is going to get a much heavier weight on the back there as far as the flex. So that's another thing that people don't realize as well. So it's going to put extra strain on that. You need to make sure you consider it an investment. It's just not something you want to cheap out on. There's a couple things in life you can buy cheap. That's not one of them.
Right. And I was just going to say that, protect your investment. Now, Dan, you have given us so much great information. We'd love to continue talking longer. Unfortunately, we're at the end of this podcast, and we want to thank you so much for the information. I've had electric bikes, and I've actually learned from this. So thank you so much for taking the time to be on the RV Life podcast.
It has really been wonderful having you here. And if you're listening to the RV Life podcast, you can reach out if you have more questions for Dan or more questions for us about e-bikes or anything else. Please reach out to us on our social media, whether you want to go to the Facebook page, the Instagram page, you want to check us out over on YouTube. You can get us anywhere that you find social media. You will find Dan and Patty Hunt and the RV Life podcast. I'm Dan Hunt with my incredible wife, Patty Hunt, saying thank you so much for the RV Life podcast listeners, and we will be back right after this.
Protecting your RV investment means being ready for anything. An extended RV warranty from Wholesale Warranties is the best way to make sure that if an RV failure happens, you can afford to get back to enjoying the RV life as soon as possible. RV warranties are available for motorhomes, fifth wheels, and travel trailers, new and used, across the U.S. Visit wholesalewarranties.com for a free personalized RV warranty quote today and hit the road with peace of mind tomorrow.
National Indoor RV Centers with over 1,000 motorhomes available across multiple locations. National Indoor RV Centers continues to provide an outstanding hassle-free motorhome ownership experience. National Indoor is the #1 Newmar dealer in the nation and also features brands like Integra, Winnebago, and much more. Visit NIRVC.com and become a part of the National Indoor RV Centers family. You're listening to the RV Life Podcast. I'm Dan Hunt with my incredible wife, Patty Hunt, and we are the host of this show. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, that last sponsor of ours, NIRVC. Patty, what do those letters mean? Because I can never remember.
National Indoor RV Center. And these are 6 centers around the country and just amazing places if you're looking to buy a motorhome, new or used. National Indoor RVC is the place to go.
You know, down in Tampa, I hung out with some of the manufacturers, Casey, who's the president of Newmar. And I was told, I think we mentioned it in the spot, but you know what? They're the #1 Newmar dealer in the country. They're also the #1 Integra dealer in the country. That's just really, really impressive to me.
And what's more impressive for me is everybody, and we've met a number of people, salespeople in their DC center, a number of people from National Indoor from across the country. And these people are amazing. They are truly just trying to find the right unit for you.
You know, and it really rolls downhill because Brett is just an incredible human being. He just knows everything, knows everybody, really cares about everybody. And then, you know, Angie, who's their national sales manager, but Matt, man, he is the general manager of the Manassas store. I got to tell you, I just love that guy.
So you said Brett. He's talking about Brett Davis, who's the owner of National Indoor RV Center. And he is an amazing, amazing human being, as you said.
You know, if you're anywhere in the Washington, D.C. area, let's just say it that way, you want to stop into the Manassas store and just check it out. Ask for Mac. Tell him that Dan and Patty sent you over. He'll give you a quick tour of the place, take you around, answer any of your questions. These people are just incredible. And speaking of incredible, that was a pretty darn good interview. Didn't you really appreciate spending time with Dan today?
Dan from Kraken Adventure Bike, he was just amazing. I love the way he looks at the bike industry. He's been in the industry for over 10 years. Him and his wife and his son love electric bikes, and that's what got them interested. And he's just out there trying to make a better bike.
And I have to tell you, these bikes, we've had them now for about 3 weeks. I know you've only played on it for about a week, but we went for a bike ride the other day, and boy, it was just great.
If you heard in the interview, my favorite part is the shock and the seat, because I've often ridden on bikes and then my butt hurt. So you heard it in the interview, and that to me is so important.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, they make a great bike. Now, if you go down to the show notes, all of the information for Kraken Adventure Bikes is down in the show notes, all the links that you need. But also, there's a code down there, HUNT. That's Patty's and my last name, Hunt. It's our last name. But guess what? you get $100 per letter. That's $400 discount on the bikes. How cool is that?
Yes, we were very excited. Dan offered all of the RV Life listeners, podcast listeners, $400 off a bike. So you want to get them. He did say he has delivery, so he can send them out to you before he runs out.
Uh-oh, you know what that sound is? That's the sound where it's RV Life Pro Tip of the Week with Patrick Buchanan.
By default, RV Life Trip Wizard creates an RV safe route, keeping you clear of any low clearances. If you want to see all of those low clearances on your map, choose the Research tab, then the Hazards tab, and click the low clearance icon. If you see a low clearance on the map that you think is on your route, remember to zoom in all the way. You'll find that the low clearance warning is typically on a side road or underpass that is not on your direct route. If you've properly entered your RV information, you won't be routed somewhere you shouldn't be. Seeing the low clearance warnings might be handy for routes you are considering but haven't mapped yet, or help explain why you're being routed a certain way on the map. With your RV Life Pro Tip of the Week, I'm Pat Buchanan.
Thank you, Patrick. I got to tell you, every time I listen to you talk, I learn something new. That's just incredible.
It really is. You have to check out RV Trip Wizard. If you haven't already checked it out, there is a link in the show notes and a code for 25% off. So that's a great deal for RV Trip Wizard, RV Life, the whole suite of products.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question of the RV Life podcast listeners, and we'd love for you to jump over to social media. It doesn't matter where you go, Instagram, Facebook, you know the drill. But something has changed in the last 2 or 3 months, and all the consultants are telling us that we should be doing these shorts and we should be on TikTok. I want to know what you guys think about shorts and TikTok. Do you like looking at them? What kind of information or things do you want to see in these video shorts that are the new craze of the world?
Well, since I'm the one that manages social media, certainly will be interesting to hear the answer. Now, as Dan said, go to Instagram and Facebook, and those pages are the RV Life Podcast. The RV Life Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. I answer all of the messages. And do you use TikTok, I guess is what you're asking them.
Well, TikTok, but YouTube as well has the shorts. Now, we have our YouTube channel, which everybody should know is Exploring Through Our Lens. There's also a community tab there, and we're going to start using that now that it's open to us. But I really want to know, you know, I have been doing shorts every single day in the month of April. And I kind of committed to doing a short a day for the entire month of April. And what do people really want to see in a short? Does it need to be funny? Do you want it to be informative? Do you want it to just be like a really cool thing? So what do you want to see? We'd love to start the conversation. So not just us, but other creators as well can make the kind of content that the audience really wants to see.
Or maybe they just want to listen to a podcast, and that would be okay too. We really would love your feedback. And again, ask questions, send us messages, comments, feedback. We'd love to hear it all.
Now, guess what? That is the horn that sounds. It's time for the question of the week, and we're talking about social media. Today's question of the week comes from not just 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but a whole bunch of questions from social media.
That's right. So what I did, and again, I manage social media, and I looked at a lot of questions that we're getting that were similar. And I thought, you know, let's put it all out there, and Dan and I could discuss it. And again, we'd love your input, your feedback. And now that the weather's starting to get warmer in most of the country and people are thinking about getting out on the road, people keep asking, what's your favorite area to be in? What's your favorite campground? And what's your favorite activity? So maybe we could tackle all of those things here in this one question of the week.
You know, and I hate to be wishy-washy on things, but let's talk about the area of the country first. And I'm going to be wishy-washy on this because my answer to that question is different at different times of the year. So here we are in April. We just spent the last 3.5, almost 4 months down in Florida. So in the wintertime, Florida might be my favorite part of the year, but I certainly don't want to be there in July and August.
No, absolutely not. And Florida is great. It was a beautiful place to be. We've also spent some summers in Arizona, which I also love. So this is a tough question, but I'm going to give an answer of one of my favorite places and campgrounds, and that is Verde Valley in Sedona. I love the area of Sedona. Verde Valley is a 1,000 Trails campground, and you know, Dan and I are members, and a lot of people have been asking questions about that. You could go to our YouTube channel, Exploring Through Our Lens, and check out our 1,000 Trails membership video on just our experience. We love it, but Verde Valley and the winery and vineyard next door, just amazing place. That was just one of the highlight places.
Yeah, you know, it really, really was beautiful there. And the convergence of the two rivers together and the wedding chapel that looks out over the convergence. It's really a great story, really a majestic kind of place. You know, but then we've gone over the hill of Mount Shasta 2 or 3 times now. And, you know, I just close my eyes and look up at that mountain and see it. That was really beautiful as well.
Right. And that was on the way to Oregon, where we spent a lot of time. Bend, Oregon is another beautiful place. But Florida, Crystal River, another beautiful place. And we could probably go on and on.
We really could. But, you know, Crystal River, that might be Dan's favorite campground. We had a boat dock in our campsite. How cool is that?
Yes. We sat out on the boat dock and just sat there and had our coffee in the morning. Beautiful. Just everything about that area in Florida was beautiful. So this is the problem when people say, what's your favorite place? Depending on the area of the country. So if you're going to a certain area of the country, certainly let us know on social media and let's continue this conversation.
You know, Patty and I really want to thank each and every one of you for listening to the RV Life podcast and supporting the RV Life podcast every week. Thousands of listeners. We are really, really grateful for the success of this show. And I just wanted to really take a second and really thank you for taking the time to listen to the RV Life podcast. My name is Dan Hunt. I'm with my incredible wife, Patty Hunt. And as always, I'm asking you to have a great rest of today.
And an even better day tomorrow.